It was a quiet night, one of those still and chilly evenings that seem to wrap the small, isolated house in a thick, comforting silence. The wind was nothing but a distant whisper against the windows, and the world outside seemed as though it was holding its breath. Inside, Henry sat alone in his chair, a paralyzed war veteran whose life had been drastically altered by the explosion that had taken both his legs and his sense of independence. The chair he sat in now was his constant companion, his only solace from a world that felt increasingly distant. Over the years, Henry had grown accustomed to this isolation. The silence had become his blanket, the stillness his only friend. His house, tucked away at the edge of town, was a place of both comfort and loneliness. The walls were adorned with relics from his past, photographs of soldiers he had once fought alongside, medals, and memorabilia from a life that felt almost foreign now. There were days when he wished he could walk again, to feel the ground beneath his feet, but those days had long passed, leaving him with memories he could no longer touch. On this night, as he sat there, wrapped in his thoughts, something stirred in the air, a noise that shattered the peacefulness he had grown so used to. At first, it was faint, almost unnoticeable, like a whisper carried on the wind. But as the seconds passed, the sound grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't the usual creaks of the house settling or the rustling of branches outside. It was something else, something desperate, a low, mournful cry. Henry's brow furrowed, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair as he listened more closely. The noise came again, clearer now, and his heart began to race in response. It wasn't an animal's typical howl, nor was it the sound of a person in distress. It was a cry, a whimper, a desperate call for help, and it sent a chill through his bones. Confusion clouded his mind. Who or what was making that sound? His first instinct was to ignore it, to chalk it up to his imagination, but deep down he knew that wasn't an option. The sound was too real, too urgent. It wasn't something he could simply dismiss. Despite the agony that shot through his body as he tried to shift in his chair, Henry's curiosity, and perhaps a sense of responsibility, pushed him forward. He knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. With great effort, he used his arms to drag himself up and out of the chair, gritting his teeth against the sharp pain that surged through his limbs. But he couldn't stay still. Not now. Not with that cry. He hobbled, every step a reminder of the life he had lost, but his determination to find the source of the sound kept him moving. Reaching the window, he strained to look out into the night. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the yard, the moonlight barely illuminating the dark stretch of land before him. And then he saw it. A large figure, lying in the grass just outside the yard, under the faint light of the moon. It was a dog, a German shepherd, its body slumped and its eyes fixed on the window. Its tail was wrapped around a rusty chain, and the dog's body seemed lifeless, but its eyes were wide open, filled with a mixture of pain and fear. The cry came again, louder this time, and Henry's stomach tightened. This was no ordinary animal. The helplessness in its eyes reflected something he had seen before in the eyes of soldiers who had been pushed beyond their limits, left to suffer in silence. And he knew in that moment that he couldn't just turn away. But Henry was paralyzed. He was stuck in a chair with no way to reach the dog. His body, once strong and capable, was now a prison. The thought of what he wanted to do, and the helplessness he felt, made his chest ache. Hook. Little did he know, this night would be the beginning of something that would change his life forever. But reaching the dog was going to take more than just willpower. It was going to take everything he had left. Henry's breath came in sharp bursts as he leaned against the window, his gaze fixed on the German shepherd outside. The dog's eyes locked with his, and for a moment Henry could have sworn that it recognized him, that it somehow understood his own desperation. The creature was tied, helpless, stranded in the middle of the yard. Every few seconds its body would shake, as though the weight of its own suffering was too much to bear. Henry felt a knot in his stomach, a mixture of guilt and helplessness rising up within him. The dog's pain mirrored his own, a reflection of the battles he had fought and lost in his own life. He had spent years watching the world pass by from his chair, unable to do much more than remember the life he used to have. And now, here was a creature, an innocent being, suffering right outside his window, and he couldn't do a thing about it. The dog cried again, louder this time, its whimper growing into a raw, heart-wrenching howl. The sound scraped against Henry's soul, pulling at something deep inside him that had been buried for years. He closed his eyes for a moment, willing the pain in his chest to go away, but it didn't. It only intensified, gnawing at him. This was his moment. The call for help wasn't just from the dog, it was a call for him, too. But how could he help? His mind raced, trying to find a way. His legs were useless. He couldn't run outside to free the dog. He had no one around to help. He was alone, trapped in his own body, and this creature, this poor animal, was waiting for a savior that couldn't reach it. His eyes fell back to the window, where the dog was now struggling against its chain. It whimpered, then let out a bark that seemed almost like a plea. Henry's heart pounded in his chest, and with it came a surge of adrenaline. He had been a soldier once. He had faced impossible odds, survived battles that others had not. So why was he frozen now? Why couldn't he do something to save this dog? A thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. His phone. He could call for help. He could at least do that. His fingers trembled as he reached for the device on the table beside him, his hands slick with sweat. His phone was always within reach, but never had it felt more important than now. With the press of a button, he dialed 911, his hands shaking as he spoke into the receiver, his voice raw and desperate. "There's a dog. It's outside. Tied up. Someone needs to help it." He choked on the words, his mind racing with the urgency of the situation. What if help didn't come in time? What if he was too late to save the dog? Henry's breath came faster, his pulse quickening with the weight of the responsibility that had just been placed on him. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but it barely reached him. All he could hear was the faint echo of the dog's cries. They were getting weaker, as though the creature was losing hope, giving in to its fate. Could Henry let this happen? He forced himself to stand, gritting his teeth against the pain that shot through his legs. He didn't care. The urgency was too great. Every step felt like a battle, but he wasn't about to let that stop him. The door. The door was his way out. Henry knew that if he could just get to it, if he could make it outside, he might be able to do something. He couldn't just wait around. But the pain was unbearable. His muscles screamed in protest as he shuffled toward the door, his arms trembling as he used every last ounce of strength to push himself forward. The world seemed to blur around him, but he couldn't stop now. Not when the dog needed him. He reached for the handle, his heart hammering in his chest, but just as he grasped it, a sound, an unmistakable sound, came from the yard. The chain. It rattled. The dog had freed itself. Henry's heart leaped into his throat as he heard the chain rattle. For a moment, he didn't believe it. Could it be? The dog, the one who had been chained up for so long, had somehow freed itself. The sound was faint but unmistakable. There was no mistaking the soft clink of metal against stone, the chain being pulled taut and snapping free. He froze, his body tingling with both relief and disbelief. Could this really be happening? Was the dog finally free? Or had it simply broken the chain only to find itself more lost than ever? The room felt suffocating as Henry struggled to move. He could barely comprehend what was happening. He had always imagined that he would be the one to help, to be the hero. But in this moment, it wasn't him. It was the dog, a creature that had endured unimaginable pain and suffering, who had fought back against its restraints, who had fought for its own survival. With great effort, Henry forced himself to his feet. His legs burned with pain, but he gritted his teeth, ignoring the shooting sensations that filled his limbs. He couldn't wait anymore. The dog had broken free. Now it was his turn to do something. He reached for the door again, but this time it wasn't to simply watch. He needed to help. There was still time. He had to be the one to guide this dog to safety. He grabbed the handle and pulled, the door creaking open as he stepped into the yard. The cool night air hit him like a wave, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt alive. The yard, which had once felt like a prison, was now a place of possibility. He looked out across the small plot of land, searching for the German shepherd. His eyes scanned the darkened yard until, through the shadows, he finally saw it. There, in the corner, panting heavily and limping slightly, the dog was standing tall. Its fur, once matted and dirty, was now slightly damp from the rain. Its eyes locked with Henry's, full of silent gratitude. It had freed itself, but it was still afraid. Henry took a step forward, his body still protesting every movement. But he didn't care. He moved slowly, cautiously, not wanting to frighten the dog, not wanting to make a mistake. The dog watched him with uncertainty, but the trembling in its body had lessened. Henry lowered his voice, trying to speak gently, as if the dog could understand him. "It's okay, buddy. You're free now. You're not alone." The German shepherd's ears twitched, and for a moment Henry thought it might bolt. But then something changed. The dog slowly began to approach him, its movements cautious but deliberate. Henry held out his hand, trembling slightly as he knelt down, trying to make himself less intimidating. He had no idea what he was doing, but he knew he couldn't leave this dog behind. And then, for the first time, the dog reached out. Its nose brushed against Henry's hand, warm and wet, like a gentle touch of reassurance. It wasn't the wild, frantic creature Henry had imagined. Instead, it was a being who had endured so much, yet still longed for connection. Henry's chest tightened with emotion as he rubbed the dog's head, feeling the roughness of its fur under his fingertips. For a few long seconds, time seemed to stop. The dog, which had been bound by chains and abandoned, had finally found someone who cared. And Henry, who had spent so long living in the shadows of his own pain, had found something he hadn't known he was looking for. A reason to keep going? But then the sudden sound of tires crunching on gravel snapped him out of the moment. Henry's heart skipped a beat as he looked toward the gate, his thoughts racing. Could it be? The headlights of a car illuminated the yard, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch on forever. Someone was coming. Someone who might have the answers Henry needed, and someone who might also be the key to the dog's future. The car's headlights flashed across the yard, blinding Henry for a moment. His pulse quickened as he instinctively took a step back, the dog standing still beside him, its body tense and alert. The engine of the car hummed in the night, its sound cutting through the otherwise silent air. Henry's heart raced, the unease growing in the pit of his stomach. Who was it? And what did they want? The car slowed to a halt near the gate, its tires grinding on the gravel as it parked. The headlights flickered out, leaving the yard in darkness once more. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the soft panting of the German shepherd beside him. Henry held his breath, his mind spinning with questions. Then the door of the car opened with a creak, and the figure stepped out. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a heavy coat pulled tightly around his body. The rain had stopped, but the night still carried an ominous chill. Henry's instincts screamed for him to stay hidden, to protect himself and the dog from whatever this man's presence might mean. But there was nowhere to run. He was already too close. The man moved toward the gate, his steps slow and measured, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Henry's eyes narrowed, trying to make out his features in the dim light. He didn't recognize the man. And yet there was something eerily familiar about his presence. He had a quiet confidence about him, like someone who had been through battles and emerged unscathed. "Hey, is everything all right?" The man's voice cut through the air, low but clear. He didn't seem startled by the sight of Henry or the dog. If anything, his tone was filled with a calm curiosity, almost as if he had been expecting them. Henry's instincts told him to be cautious, but he forced himself to take a step forward. The dog stood silently by his side, its eyes following the man with a mixture of distrust and wariness. It hadn't made a move yet, but Henry could feel the tension in its body. He wasn't sure what to do, or how to respond. Should he tell the man what had been happening? Could he even trust him? The man stopped a few feet away, and his gaze dropped to the German shepherd. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply stared at the dog, his eyes softening in what appeared to be recognition. "I thought it was you," he muttered, mostly to himself. Henry froze. How did the man know the dog? The man knelt down, slowly, as if giving the dog time to process his presence. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, boy?" he whispered, his voice surprisingly gentle. "But don't worry, you're safe now." The dog, who had been cautious, now moved closer to the man, its tail stiff, but its posture relaxed. Henry watched, unable to move, as the man reached out a hand. The dog didn't flinch. Instead, it sniffed his fingers before gently nuzzling his hand. There was something in the way the dog reacted, something familiar about the way it trusted the man. Henry stood frozen, unsure of what to make of this strange situation. "Do you know this dog?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The man looked up at him, his expression shifting. "I know this dog very well," he replied, "and I know how much he's been through. His name's Max. He's been in a bad place for far too long." Maximum. The name hit Henry like a punch to the gut. The dog had a name. It wasn't just some stray animal that had wandered into his life. It was someone's dog, someone who cared enough to name him. And now, here he was, standing before a man who seemed to know him like family. Before Henry could say anything more, the man stood and gave a small nod. "I'm here to help," he said, the calmness in his voice now replaced by an edge of determination. "We can't let him stay out here, not anymore." Henry's mind raced. He had no idea who this man was, but something in his demeanor, in the way he spoke, made Henry feel like he was finally seeing a light at the end of a long tunnel. The dog was no longer alone. This stranger, this man, seemed to understand what Max had been through. More than that, he wanted to help. But Henry knew he couldn't just let this man take the dog away. "Who are you?" Henry asked, his voice trembling with the weight of the moment. The man hesitated for a second, his eyes flickering toward Max. "I'm his trainer," he said simply. "I've been looking for him." Henry's heart raced as the man's words sank in. "I'm his trainer." Those words felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, but Henry still had so many questions. How could this man be connected to Max? Why had he been left alone for so long? The air between them thickened with uncertainty. Max stood still, his tail now wagging gently as he continued to nuzzle the man's hand. It was almost as if Max recognized the man, as if he had been waiting for him all along. But Henry couldn't help but feel conflicted. The dog had been through so much, and now, just when he thought they might finally have a chance to heal, someone else was swooping in. The dog was not just a stray anymore. He had a name, a past, and it seemed a future with this stranger. "I don't know." Henry's voice trembled. "You don't understand. He's been alone out here for so long. I've been taking care of him, feeding him, keeping him company. He trusts me now." The man nodded slowly, his expression soft but unwavering. "I understand more than you think," he said gently. "Max has been through things you can't even imagine. He's been abandoned, left in the cold, ignored by those he trusted. But he's still fighting, and it's because of people like you, Henry, that he's still alive." The way the man spoke about Max stirred something deep inside Henry. The bond between them was undeniable. He had seen it in the dog's eyes every time they locked gazes. But at that moment, Henry realized that sometimes letting go was the best thing you could do for someone you loved. He had given Max a chance to heal, and now this man, the one who understood Max's past, would be able to take him forward into a life where he would truly be loved and cared for. Henry took a deep breath, his mind racing as the weight of the decision bore down on him. The dog had trusted him, yes, but Max deserved more than Henry could offer him. Max deserved the chance to thrive, to be cared for by someone who understood his trauma, someone who could offer him the life he had been denied for so long. "Okay," Henry finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll let you take him, but promise me you'll take good care of him. He's been through hell and back." The man's eyes softened. "I swear I will. Max will never be alone again." And with that, the decision was made. Henry took a step back as the man gently coaxed Max to his side, the dog following without hesitation, his eyes meeting Henry's one last time. There was a silent understanding between them, a mutual recognition that their journey together had come to an end, but Max's journey had just begun. Max was no longer a stray. He was no longer the broken, abandoned dog who had been left to suffer alone in the cold. He was now a dog with a future filled with love, care, and protection. As the man and Max walked toward the car, Henry stood in the yard watching them go. The tears that had been threatening to fall finally came, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of knowing that Max was finally going to get the life he deserved. The sound of the car starting echoed through the still night, and Henry felt a sense of peace settle over him. Max would be okay. Max's story was not one of hopelessness. It was a story of redemption, of a dog's journey from despair to hope. But it was also a reminder to us all. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is to let go, even when it hurts. If you believe in second chances for those who need it most, share Max's story with someone who needs to hear it. Remember to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories that prove love and care can change lives.